Today, we are covering combat basics so you can skip the noob phase and get straight to burning the enemies of mankind. At the beginning of combat, there is a deployment phase. You can deploy your characters anywhere in the green areas shown. When deploying, it is a really good idea to deploy behind cover for protection. If you look at this full shield with a skull on it, that counts as full cover, and if you look at this half shield here, that of course is partial cover. Not only does full cover provide a better benefit than partial cover, but it also has the added bonus of being indestructible, while partial cover can be easily destroyed. Once everyone is in position, you can begin combat. If you open the combat log, you'll see everyone rolled initiative, and you can see the turn order here on the left. If you mouse over a unit's picture, it will highlight that unit on the battlefield, and it will also show you the status effects the unit has, and you can see the hit points here as well. If you want to take a closer look at a unit's character sheet, simply right-click to bring up the details. You can also use these portraits to target a unit, and you can double-click them to move to the unit on the battlefield, like so. Your party also has portraits here at the top, and these will display your wounds, effects, and can be used for targeting. And no, not this kind of wound. Wounds are what we actually call hit points in Rogue Trader for, I don't know, some reason. There are 4 actions a unit can take on its turn. They can move, attack, use consumable items, or activated abilities. Moving costs movement points, and the number of movement points you have is a function of your character's agility, active effects, and passive effects. Each character can only make 1 attack per turn unless they have an ability that grants them additional attacks. Making an attack consumes all remaining movement points, so make sure that you do get into position before you attack. The attacks you have available are determined by the weapons equipped. There are a variety of different weapons with different attacks, ranging from single target shots to burst fire spreads, cones, targeted area of effects, and others. The yellow dots here, next to the attacks and next to all of your abilities and consumables, show the number of action points needed for you to use that action. Each character only gets 4 action points per turn until level 20 when they get a 5th action point. Next, we have consumables. Every unit can carry up to 4 consumable items. FYI, grenades count as attacks, so you generally can't fire your weapon and throw a grenade on the same character's turn unless you have an ability that allows you to do so. Also, only 1 of each type of consumable can be used on a character's turn, so yeah, unfortunately there is no doubling up on medikit healing. Last, we have our abilities seen here. These generally fall into 1 or more of 6 categories. Those being attack abilities, healing, buffs, debuffs, utility, or ultimate abilities. Now let's cover the rest of the information here at the bottom of the screen, and then we'll have some combat examples. Here on the left, you see an inventory button. I'm really not sure why, because unlike in Wrath of the Righteous, you cannot change any gear, including weapons or consumables, during combat. What you start with is what you have. Now this is beta, so Owlcat could change that, but I really do not expect them to. Next, we have weapon sets. Every character except Pascal has 2 weapon sets. A weapon set can be 2 one-handed weapons or 1 two-handed weapon. Changing between weapon sets can be done at will, as it doesn't cost anything. Oh, and by the way, you cannot simultaneously attack with 2 one-handed weapons. Using one-handed weapons does give you more versatility, but no extra damage or attacks. Next, we have Reload, which is only present for weapons with a projectile capacity. Even though Reload is bunched with the attacks, it does not take up your attack action, so you can reload and use your attack in the same round. Okay, let's look at the Veil thickness and momentum bars here and here. The Veil thickness bar shows how thick or thin the veil separating the physical world from the immaterium or warp is. Every time a warp ability is used, this bar will fill a certain amount. and once it fills to this point, bad things can happen. After it's filled, a demon might be summoned, or it could deal damage to you or something else negative. Depending on the place and the situation, this bar might fill up very, very quickly or slowly, so keep an eye on it and if you are using your Psyker abilities. As for momentum, well, you can see there are 2 thresholds here. You will gain momentum at the beginning of each party member's turn and whenever you kill an enemy. However, every time a party member is wounded, gets a trauma, or is knocked unconscious, you can lose momentum. If you gain enough momentum to fill the bar to this point on the right, you can use a Heroic Act, which is a powerful ultimate ability. If on the other hand, you lose so much momentum that you reach this point on the left, you can use a Desperate Measure. Desperate measures are the same as a Heroic Act, except that they come with a penalty that lasts until the end of combat. Still, even with the penalty, Desperate Measures can turn the tide of battle and transform a certain defeat into a narrow victory. Alright, last one I promise, then we'll get to the combat. We have the combat log. This tells you what happens in combat, and if you right-click on an event, you can see a detailed explanation of what happened and why. This information is extremely helpful in determining what your weaknesses and strengths are relative to the enemies that you are fighting, allowing you to adjust your tactics as needed. The formulas used to determine hits, misses, dodges, and parries can get a little confusing, so I'm not covering that stuff here, but if you would like for me to cover it in a future video, let me know in the comments down below. Let's look at ranged attacks and targeting using the Sniper Rifle basic attack. When you target a ranged attack, or any attack really, at any enemy, you'll notice a percentage to hit chance appear above their head, along with the expected damage range of the attack, and the flashing bar here shows how much of their wounds or hit points they will lose. In this example, you can see that the enemies behind the target have flashing bars over their heads as well. If the attack misses the intended target, it can potentially hit either of these units. If we switch to the Sniper Rifle Deadeye Shot attack, which increases the range of the Sniper Rifle attack, you can see here that another unit gains a % to hit chance. This seems to happen because we have enough range and penetration to over-penetrate through the first target and hit this target as well. However, I can't fully explain over-penetration as there is not an in-game explanation for it as of yet. I'll be glad whenever we have tutorials implemented so that we can get a better and direct explanation of how exactly this mechanic works. Here we have Argenta with a burst fire weapon. All burst fire weapons are pretty strong, but giving a marksman a burst fire weapon, especially the splinter cannon, basically turns them into... So when you target with a burst fire weapon, you get this red path to show where the bullets can possibly travel. Each unit in that area has a percentage chance to be hit. Burst fire can result in friendly fire, so be careful, but you can also damage or even kill multiple enemies with burst fire attacks. Burst fire attacks can over-penetrate, just like normal attacks, as you see here, making them even more effective at clearing groups of enemies. Here, we have Argenta in a bad situation. You'll notice these red squares around her. These squares represent the enemy's zone of control. Each melee unit has a zone of control, which is basically every square that its base touches. Units typically cannot make ranged attacks while in an enemy's zone of control, except with pistols and the like. Also, you can use consumables and abilities while in the enemy's zone of control, but some of them, like grenades, will give the enemy an attack of opportunity. Also, moving through these areas can cost extra movement points, and of course allows the enemy unit to make an attack of opportunity when you do. Thankfully, some classes, like the marksman here, do get abilities like Dash, that allow them to avoid attacks of opportunity, and then Since Argenta is such a badass, she can turn around and lay waste to the heretical scum. Here we see Abelard engaged in melee combat, which is pretty similar to ranged combat, except that melee attacks are dependent on your weapon skill and strength, and melee attacks can be parried as well as dodged. The biggest advantages of melee weapons is that nearly all come with some type of AoE attack. They can force enemy ranged units to choose between not attacking or incurring an attack of opportunity, and they don't need to be reloaded.
At your beck and call. I took care of this one.
That should cover the basics, but tactical combat in this game has a lot of depth, with characters being able to combo their own abilities together, as well as combo their abilities with other party members. Once we start getting into specific classes, you'll see what I mean. There is real power to be had if you look for it. This has been Chris with Lorespire. Be well, my friends.